It's my thing.
I know.
It makes you keep it flexible.
It's a special one. I know it's in here, but we don't usually do it special. I don't know, everyone jumps up. Alright, call this special board meeting to order. I think we're gonna get a couple more coming in. There's only a couple things on the agenda. Public comment on anything that is not on the agenda. Okay, all right, so first thing on there is personnel reports. So in your board packet, you'll see retirement and resignation, and then some appointments from middle school stuff. Anything to add?
Just a thank you to Debbie Ashmore and Adam Genovese, two special education teachers. Debbie's a longtime teacher in the district, so thank you to her. Those are big shoes to fill, and yeah, we'll do our best.
Sounds good. All right, any comments, questions? If not, can I get a motion to approve the personnel report? So moved. Can I get a second? Perfect. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Perfect. All right, next one, and the reason really we're here is the discussion of the annual school election and possible action on the running of the tech or safety levy. Cool.
Yeah. So in your packet, there are two, and I know we've talked about these two levies before. There's a narrative proposal for a technology levy, and there is also a proposal for a safety levy. What I wanted to do tonight was entertain or guide a discussion to try to answer a few key questions, one of which would be yes or no to one, the other, or neither, or the other option is both. And talk about kind of the overall picture of our situation. And as I have gone on the last couple months and really the last 6 months in learning about our budget and really developing the annual report for you, which we'll have available to you in February, what I am noticing is there is an overall budgetary trend that's coming our way, maybe not immediately, but within the next couple of years. I see our enrollment, or A and B, starting to decrease. Right now, we're in a situation where we are being supported in our charter with being able to count kids essentially in both schools. There will be some adjustment from OPI and from the state that will shrink some of that. We were not selected to move on in the Transformational Learning Grant. That is something that we've spent some time and effort really trying to hone in some new things there. Those funds will no longer be available to us. And so in fiscal year 28, we will see an inflationary increase in our general fund budget, but we'll also see a reduction because of our A&M. So that inflationary increase, when you start looking at, one is running faster than the other is really what's happening. And so we're gonna need to do some fiscally responsible things to minimize the negative impact of that. So in front of you tonight is the opportunity to discuss two options: a safety levy, which would put funds available for key safety personnel mostly, but also be able to do some infrastructure things, continuous improvement sorts of upgrades to our facilities, access control, surveillance, communication systems, those sorts of things. We would make sure that we are, the operation of those is always in check and making sure that those happen. By doing that, what it does is it takes the safety personnel and the safety resources out of competition for scarce resources in the general fund budget. So having those taken care of first allows us to just take that out of the conversation. right now, for example, some of our key safety people in the district, school resource officers, we are technically only funding one right now. The second officer in the district is being funded through a federal police grant. At some point, we have to make the decision of whether or not we want to continue with those two SROs. We also have mental health support in our schools, and those are things that we don't have to have, but I can tell you that they're not extras. They are so essential to the operation of what we do. They're just key pieces of keeping kids safe and keeping kids engaged in school, and keeping our staff safe as well. All of those resources are really key. So that is one thing for us to discuss. On the other side of that is the technology levy. We have, I don't want to paint the picture or give people the illusion that we have all of this shiny new technology and all of these things that are really fancy bells and whistles. They are not. What this ask is not about something that is brand new and innovative and something that is just absolutely wow, that is really cool. This is really about maintenance. This is really about maintaining the functionality of our operations. When you look around this room, we are required to have a camera in the room. We are required to have technology that's going to run that. If we don't have those sorts of things, then the basic operations of our district, from our telephones to the internet access to software and hardware, all of those things are impacted. We are seeing a real significant shift in our technology vendors and the cost of goods. 72% of our operational costs are increasing because of that. And so this again becomes something that competes for resources within our school district. And so again, this is a measure that I am proposing to you to try to, let's keep that separate so that we aren't competing against the human resources and the instructional things that we have in place and the programs that we have in place, so that we can maintain the excellence that we have and continue to build upon our strengths. So that is the gist of what is behind this ask. I'll just free it up for questions, and then we can get into some of the details of each one and talk about them separately. But any questions so far?
First one on SRO, when is the expiration of that grant? Is it next year?
I believe it's
This was the first year.
first year, so I think there's 2 more years.
I think it's 4 years.
But
and then
it tapers,
decreases.
right?
Yes,
It's not like, this year it's 100%, but next year it's only 70?
I think
Something like that?
75, right, around there.
Kind of goes down on top, 25%.
Okay. And does this take into consideration when you listed those costs, like for SROs, does that have the anticipated increase in wage schedule for them over the next?
It doesn't. One of the things that I did on the very last table, when you look at some proposals that are on that last table. So like, when I look at the safety levy, the 287 is really about as close to bare bones as you can get. And that does not consider wage increases or anything like that. So that's the bare minimum to maintain that. The 344 is a 20% increase above that, and that 20% would, one, make some funds available for infrastructure sorts of things, whether there are new kiosks at the entrances so that we have safety measures there, or a communication system or something like that. But in addition to that would be salaries. So if, the cost of an SRO today is going to be different in 5 years.
Any other questions before we get in the meat? All right, let's go to it. Which one do you want to break down
Okay.
first?
Let's, since I'm looking at this table on the back, let's take a look at technology first. Let's talk through that. And really, thank you, Mike, and Mike, I want you to jump in here, so please don't let me steal your thunder. But, Mike has put together some data here for you. You'll get two tables. One table, you can see, what we've spent out of the various funds that are technology-related costs. You can see really what's clearest is looking for, from 23, 24 to 24, 25, you can see a pretty, significant jump from 280,000 to 282,000. That's your 70, well, that's not 72%, but that's a significant increase. The general fund is where you'll see the 72% increase. And that's the fund that we're paying very close attention to managing most of the time. Not that the others don't matter, but that's one that gets a majority of our focus. So you can see that. And then you can, if you flip to the next page, you have essentially a graph that shows you an average. So the average cost from 2021 projected to 2036. And these again are projections, and Mike, jump in if you want here, but anything, those bar graphs that go above the line, those are costs in excess of our average. Those two lines that dip below the average, that is what you see when you have federal funding in the form of ESSER, where we aren't having to pay above and beyond that. We're actually paying less out of our funds and using for that. But that creates its own animal in itself. We've created some purchases in technology that eventually are going to wear out. And that money is no longer there. And so when you look ahead, you see some cycles of some larger purchases. So that is in the tech levy on the very back page again, the 255 would be to cover what would be essentially our average. And then the other options in that technology levy are increases that are a little more realistic to what technology expenses would be like. I don't know what the motivation or the appetite for support on something like that may be. That's why we're having the conversation, but I wanted to at least put that question out to the trustees to talk a little bit about. Mike, anything to add on that?
Yeah, just to emphasize what David said, Mr. Tennyson said about the speed bumps, as we started to call them there. As you can clearly see, one of our first ones is gonna come along in 2028, and then we'll have another one in 2031. As Dave spoke up very briefly, I mean, I could give you a numerous different examples, but the vendors are creating quite a challenge for the educational realm. It seems like there is a trend where they make their licensing decisions around corporate ability to absorb those costs, and they really don't think about education as much as they used to. Literally, our Cisco phone system, I think I alluded to this in an earlier board meeting, they literally stopped providing educational discounts. They're just done. That was kind of shocking, and that seems to be a trend. We're getting the same kinds of signals coming from Sophos, which is our cybersecurity. So some of these are the natural increases over time with inflation, but some of these are just, to put it bluntly, feel like money grabs on the part of some of the vendors, and there's no way to get away from it. We could pivot to another solution for the phones, the costs would be comparable. We could pivot to another solution for cybersecurity, but it's an industry-wide trend. It's not something we can escape by just dropping one vendor and moving to another one. And so these are things that I certainly didn't see coming 5 years ago. So those are some of the aspects of these challenges that Mr. Tennyson alluded to that are very unique to technology.
One of the things that I joke with Mike about, but it's not really a joke because it's true, you know, when you're wanting to watch an NFL football game and you find out, oh, it's no longer on CBS, I have to get Amazon Prime now. So what we used to have, we have to then go buy the subscriptions to be able to do the same things that we used to do, because that's the new model that a lot of our vendors are using in technology. And so that's the reality of our situation.
Mike, I didn't catch, why there are speed bumps, were they 3-year contracts?
There is that, so there's at least two different phenomena creating these speed bumps. One of them is very much that when we have an opportunity to purchase licensing over a 3-year period and a 5-year period, I don't remember our exact numbers, Kathy, but specifically, we were just renewing the licensing for these wireless access points we have in the ceiling. Again, as I think I mentioned in the earlier board meeting, you buy the hardware, you buy the initial device, but you have to keep paying the license ongoing. It's like back with Adobe, we have the same phenomenon. You used to get a disc, it's not a disc anymore, it's a download, you have to log in, et cetera. So part of it is that when we can purchase licensing for a longer time frame for a less cost, we certainly go after that. It creates a little bit of complication with the encumbering and trying to manage things on a year-to-year basis. But if I remember correctly, Kathy, I mean, I think we were talking about the difference between hundreds of dollars per license per device when we go with savings, when we go with the multiple year license. And so with someone, we have a 3-year, ideally we go a 5-year, because that tends to be a vendor offers at the best price. So that's part of the phenomenon with licensing, but then we also have hardware costs. We run essentially 3 server arrays. We have one in this building, one in the high school, one in the middle school. Daily pulls off of our array here, and the Washington building pulls off of the server array in the middle school. We've just done some finagling on that to consolidate and save costs. But those tend to have between a 5 and 10-year life cycle, depending on how much you want to roll the dice on whether or not the hardware is going to fail. I tend to push that as far as I can because I trust HP because of our history with them. So we're looking at a refresh rate around 5 to 7 years for the hardware. So that's part of what you're seeing in here as well. Is some of those speed bumps are created by licensing that we just have to pay a significant amount on a 3-year or 5-year cycle, and some of it's replacing hardware for servers and some of the other things that we maintain to keep the infrastructure running. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. And then the years when it's, the overage is significantly less, we're just not having to pay the licensing fees, or we're not, and our more standard costs are just much lower.
That's where the average comes in, yeah, is that it tends to be that $250,000 range, and yeah, and it bumps up on those years when we have to either absorb the cost of a hardware refresh or the licensing coming up based on whatever cycle we're in.
So, any other technology related questions?
Mike, have you looked at other things in terms of like virtual servers, that kind of stuff, trying to like reduce instead of hardware that way? Looking at, multi-district agreements too, trying to see if we can reduce costs across all the districts. I know that just came out in HP, whatever, and stuff like that. Just looking at different thought processes to reduce that number down from, because it's 253 is your flat, right? But if I take out the ESSER years, right, it's really more, you're talking probably more like 275.
Mhm.
So it's, if we made it all flat. And so I was just trying to, I know you're creative, so I'm not saying that.
No.
I think there's different ways of getting new creative with that kind of process.
Yeah, I mean, the situation that arises, like, for example, I have another document here that I'm happy to share with the board if they want to look at. We looked at the possibility, for example, in the direction of your question, of taking the phones and not, we currently have 2 Cisco servers in the high school, they're redundant, it's necessary for a phone system. So those basically support the phones. The phones, if you hit complete reset on the phone, it'll check in with the server, and the server will more or less inject its operating system and its functionality back into it. So that's a set of hardware in the high school. I've looked at the cost of pushing all of that up in the cloud. We can take these phones, we can push all of the call management system up into the Cisco cloud and not have a hardware refresh in the high school, if we have to do. And I'm happy to share this document with you, but when I started looking at the comparison of numbers, for example, if we looked at, let's use 2029 as an example, the operational cost for the licensing and maintaining what we have in the high school right now is $15,000. If we moved up into the cloud, that would be $32,000. So we give up the need to maintain the hardware in the high school and the vendors that we work with on that. But Cisco knows what the cost difference is. And so they just grab money. I'll be blunt about it. I think it's a money grab. This is software. This is not consumables. It's electrons. It's not anything like that. But, that's more than double the cost for that single. So I have looked at similar things with pushing servers. You can go up and you can push everything into Microsoft's online tenant. We could do all that. We could have, instead of having Active Directory on hardware here in the district, we could push Active Directory into the cloud. But none of those come with a reduction in cost. They typically come with the same kind of.
Until you have capital cost to buy new equipment.
Right.
So does it make sense to get to the point where your equipment's gonna have to be replaced and then look at that a little closer? Because at some point, we're gonna have to deal with the equipment.
Yeah. I mean, when we get, and I've had this conversation with Pineville, our vendor, and they deal with a lot of different schools, in the direction of what Patrick's alluded to with, seeing what our other options are. And they don't have very many schools that are moving to some sort of cloud-based thing because if you have a hired staff on hand that can manage those and keep them up, which Seth and I do, your cost is one scenario with the equipment on premise, and then if you.
And I've heard the refurbished market is actually pretty important.
I think it is, yeah. So those are all things to explore as we get to that, but yeah.
What percentage of the technology levy would go toward technology for infrastructure and versus student-related technologies?
I would have to look at that number to see how it breaks out, and I couldn't give you a percentage.
I'd be curious to know, is it 50% goes to student-related stuff versus functions of the school? Is it, what is it? I have no idea.
Right, and then we gotta get into the nuance of, Wi-Fi is something that we all use, so we have to sort of do a percentage of what that cost is and how much of that bears on the students' activities versus just the cost of keeping the business running. But we could tease out those numbers, but at this point, we don't have anything broken out like that.
I can see that being a question people would ask.
Yeah.
Because I think you're getting a lot of questions that you're buying a bunch of laptops for kids or something like that, which is not really what this is for. It's
Right,
more.
to Dave's point, it's like, well, you guys just get the technology thing so you can buy a whole bunch of fancy laptops for all your kids, when what we're really trying to do is just maintain half of it's for our phone system and our servers for keeping our enterprise together.
Yeah, exactly.
Might be good to know what percentage of that.
Yeah, you're right on the money. I don't think this is for anything that's shiny and brand new. This is for maintaining the current functionality of our school district so that we can continue to operate at a good level.
Yeah, I mean, we would have in an ideal world, we would have a refresh rate. Like right now, what I encourage the building administrators, and they've been on board with this, I really appreciate it because I think it's a long-term view that we need to maintain. Each year I ask them to refresh 5 of their staff laptops. And the logic there is that if we refresh 5 per year, we're never going to get to the point where we're going to have 15 devices all tank on the same date because of their age and just the hardware we're now. So ideally, the only thing I would encourage us to move to is the same sort of refresh rate for student devices. But it's not going to be all new and shiny, it's just going to be refreshing so that the ones that are just genuinely worn out and I can't put it back together again after the latest incident, we've got new ones in the hopper to replace those.
Dave? Ask the same question when we get to safety. So if we boil it down to brass tacks, worst case scenario, we run levies that don't pass, or we decide not to run levies at all. What's the first thing on the chopping block, and how does that look? And how do we cut the funds to where we're at level again? What has to go if we don't have the money?
Yeah, the unfortunate reality is, school district budgets don't have a whole lot of extra stuff. It's not like you can, save a whole bunch of money on lights, utilities, paper towel in the bathrooms, those sorts of things. Honestly, it's people. It's,
So the first thing to go is personnel.
88% of our budget is human resource related. So when you have to make significant decisions, that's where you gotta look. And I think there's a
That's even
responsible
level,
way, I think there's a responsible way to look at that. And, that's part of what I want this ongoing conversation with our admin team to be. And that is, looking at doing this through attrition, but it can't be, it can't be every time we have a retirement or a resignation that we don't fill that particular position. That's not responsible either. Because there are certain things that we absolutely positively have to have. And I don't come into this district and think, well, we got a whole bunch of fluffy, elaborate stuff. We don't. But that's the decisions that we'll have to make in the next few years, without some of this.
And that's on this list, one with all the.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's
honestly, if you're looking at human resources on that particular list, I'm not saying that those are up on the chopping block at all, I'm not saying that at all, but then you have to make the decision of what are we obligated to have? Like, what are we required to have versus what is nice to have? And that's not a situation I want to put our children in, and that's not a situation I want to put our staff in. And so this is me coming to you saying, hey, I think we need a little extra help. We're not, I'm not asking for a whole bunch, but these things I think reasonably could put us in a better situation. When you look at the cost for a property owner, if you're looking at your table, $600,000 home, I'll just give you what the monthly cost would be for looking at the technology level at $255,000 would be $3.08. 430 would be $5.19 a month. And then the 515 would be $6.22 per month. It's hard to buy a latte for less than $6 anymore. And so that's the economy of scale helps us to get into a better situation to where we aren't having to look at the scarcity of resources and put good things against good things and degrade our system.
So I guess my intent in asking the question is to point out the fact that with or without a technology levy, the technology we're talking about is essentially a function of the district. So we don't have the option of cutting out technology to reduce, the cost of technology. We have the only option of reducing personnel in the district to accommodate the cost of the technology that we need to have, correct?
Correct.
And that's the same thing with either tech or safety, regardless of what we're talking about. We're still talking about the same thing. We don't have the luxury of cutting out the things that we have. We only have the tech luxury of, and it's not a luxury, we only have the option of reducing the personnel cost to accommodate the necessities that we have, both in tech and in safety, correct?
Yep. Take, for example, the day that we had the windstorm or we had the power outage. For a while, we were able to function with our phones and that whatnot, but the power impacted the servers that runs the phones. And then all of a sudden, when parents are calling to say, hey, I want to excuse my child, those systems go down. So now we're having to look at what do we have to do to have those backups in place? That's a must have. Like, we have to have those things in place. And so we've had some conversations about what do we do when that happens again so that we have the backups in place. But to not have that is not an option.
So I guess the only question is how to communicate that to the public enough that they understand that that's where the scales come in, right?
Right.
And that's the complicated part, that's the difficulty. It's, at the end of the day, whether it's $1 or $10 a month, there's a lot of people in the community that look at, do you want more money for what? No. And so, unless there's an understanding that we're talking about people's livelihoods and jobs, not that we're gonna get a different phone system and save $100,000, right? I don't think it's a question of whether or not we need the funds or whether or not we should run the levy. It's a question of how in the world do we present this thing so that it's understood by the public that this isn't what he was talking about, a money grab by the district trying to get the fluffy stuff and, you know, the shiny whatever. I don't know how to do that.
Well, and that's why I like Dave's analogy, you know, I mean, you could take it a step further. Well, now my favorite thing to watch is on Amazon Prime, but it's now, for whatever reason, now it's on Netflix. I've got a subscription to Amazon Prime, well, do I probably, you know, it's, people are dealing with this at home, but I totally agree with you, Eli, I don't know how, right now, what that awesome message is, and I think we just gotta work on that.
Our operational costs are stressing our system, just like operational costs are stressing the household budgets of all of our families. That, you know, you hear all the time in the news about affordability. Well, affordability applies to schools, but we also know, because we all live in our homes and we know that the affordability in our homes is different than what it used to be. And I appreciate that. And so I know that when we're asking for this isn't just asking because these would be great things to have. They would be great things to have, but that's not really, this is about continuing to operate in a really good school system with the right resources, the right size of resources, and not, you know, getting elaborate and getting in front of ourselves too much, but just getting the right match to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible and maintaining, you know, a strong foundation for our district.
When does our bond finish? For the couple years from now?
2028 is the end of one of our debt service.
That's the loan.
The loan.
The bonds we did in 2017, so 2047.
How much, do you recall how much that affects a $100,000 value on a home? I mean, I wonder whether or not that should be part of the conversation. When I think about, you know, the affordability thing, if you remind people that in a couple of years, the tax burden is gonna go down because of this thing that's being completed, and therefore all we're really asking for is, you know, funds that might, you know, replicate or replace those funds. It doesn't seem to me like it's as big of an ask.
Yeah.
From the affordability, it might be for a year or two, but not for very long. And I think people forget that, I mean, it's easy to forget that that's gonna come off and reduce tax burden. And however, I mean, it'd be interesting, I guess, for me to know what will that reduce? What will that reduce our tax burden in the same way in 3 years? That would be a good conversation, I think, for people who are really wanting to dive into what the real effect is gonna be. You know, the beginning of 28 or the end of 28? I mean,
No, it's because we did it in 2017, so it's at least 30 till 37.
that's the bond.
The bond.
So I'm confused, there's two pieces, kind of a debt service and a bond?
Yeah, the loan and the.
We had an internal loan to do daily, right?
Yes,
So that's coming off here very soon,
In 28.
in 20, how much is that, Kathy?
It's about, I want to say 200,000 a year.
So that's just out of our budget.
And that just goes back into the general fund.
Let's see,
That doesn't come off the tax roll, that just goes back.
oh, so that's not gonna change your tax rules at all.
No, the
But it does give
bond,
us a little
the
more.
bond will.
It gives us money, but the bond, yeah.
The bond will.
Those are the documents we have.
Yeah.
Strike what is it?
Was that taken into account in that projection?
That is not.
And so in 2028, we may have an additional
Yeah.
couple hundred grand.
The one other thing, the other piece of revenue that I didn't mention here, because there's still some debate about what the magnitude of this is. We have some really cool stuff going on in the Polytech and in the high school that get our kids certifications and dual credit and all of those sorts of things. So there will be a future ready payment in fiscal year 2028, but that could range anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000. But we are still waiting for some guidance from the Department of Labor to determine, kind of how those credits are calculated and what that looks like and what state reporting looks like. And so it's hard to create a really good projection without knowing those details. So that is out there.
Sounds good.
So the question I think I have for all of you is, what do we have the capacity to ask for? I do want to, obviously be respectful of our community and taxpayers, and be nice to be able to do both of these to keep them from competing against each other, but I don't know if that is a reality. So
Do you want to go to the meat of the safety one a little bit?
sure, yeah.
If you had to prioritize one or the other for our district, which would you prioritize? Is that a fair question?
I think my answer is whichever one the community would support, to be totally honest with you, because either of them would be helpful, both of them would be extremely helpful. I feel like there would be more support around a safety levy as opposed to a technology levy, because I think that's a clearer message for us to communicate. But I do see needs in both areas for sure. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, as well as you can answer.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
The crystal ball.
we want to get into the meat of the safety and security, but yeah, I feel the same way. It's the decoupling it from the general fund. It's the same logic. We all see the need of it, but it's more about what is palatable for the community.
Right. So when you jump into the safety figures and you look at some of the things that I want to point out on the human resource costs of safety, I would never want to operate a district or a school without this, but we don't have to have school resource officers. I wouldn't recommend that to any school district. They are exceptionally valuable to what we do. I know Marlon and Angela spent probably 8 hours today working specifically with school resource officers and mental health professionals to make sure that they were following some safety protocols that absolutely needed to be done. And had they not had those resources in the room, that honestly becomes a little scary. And those are not decisions that I want to have to be making.
And the community who would vote no on this, if we cut those, would be the same community that would be outraged. That we didn't take care of their kids.
Can you explain that to me? Like what, I just don't remember seeing a police officer in the schools when I was going to school. And like now Hamilton, Montana, if we don't have police officers in our school, there's a safety concern?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that student behavior over the course of time has gotten more sophisticated, more elaborate, and some of the things that happen border on that line of, are they criminal situations?
So we're worried more about students in the school as opposed to something else going on.
Well, I think it's both. I mean,
Obviously,
yeah. But
we're
you're right.
concerned about everything.
I can tell you philosophically, for me, I always look at school safety as an inside-out job. I think it's really about the relationships between staff and students and awareness within a building. And just kids will tell you when they see things that they don't feel comfortable about. And they'll go to somebody that they know and trust and they'll say, hey, something's up. And it allows us to intervene and take care of things. So when those things come to our attention, and sometimes that person is the SRO, and they go to the SRO. But when we are aware of those situations and it is one of those things that, hey, I need some help here, they're there with us as a partner and we can go take care of things. Now, we had our own example of somebody that was able to get into the building, and so that's a concern as well. We have all kinds of procedures and protocols, but really, again, it boils down to the people in the buildings doing the work and being trained to be able to take care of situations when they take care of them. That's exactly what happened in the high school. But it doesn't mean that we can't make sure that we have some systems in place. They may not be 100%, all the time, but having those systems in place and having staff that are trained and vigilant and feeling their own safety and making sure that they're taken care of it, I think those are all things that we're trying to keep.
Another facet to that, Mike, that might not be obvious to maybe anybody besides Dave at the table, but we see like an increased amount of time that we have to spend on mitigating domestic matters. So when we have people's children all day, their home matters come to our doorstep. And a lot of times, it's the principals and the assistant principals that are managing that. But having that backup from an SRO who A, might know the kids and the family, but B, also can take a look at court documents and, be that authority figure while our staff can maintain the relationship with the family that's so important just to keep the relationship and have the students thrive. So it really is just like a 360-degree issue.
Thank you. My high school had a fairly consistent police officer in it. I don't remember exactly if we call him an SRO or not, but they were a very consistent presence, especially at like the sporting events and stuff like that. I mean, I know it made me feel more comfortable. Make you more comfortable as a parent too.
I mean, I see exactly what you're saying, but
Can you dive into the rest of it? Because, SRO is what, 7% of what the budget I'm looking at?
Right, and what you can see on your HR kind of dashboard there, you're seeing the salary of 1. And right now we have it, so you could double that. And then, obviously, nursing services and guidance counselors and all of that, there are requirements in terms of the numbers of counselors that we have to have in our buildings per the number of students that are available. But then you get into, having safety officer in our building, our safety coordinator, having somebody that is a leader in training our staff and making sure that our drills are realistic and we are ready to go. And then social work and behavior specialists are really to support kids that are struggling and support staff when kids are struggling that have a different skill set than what our teachers may have. They're just, I don't need to tell anybody in this room that mental health is really complicated and it can be very frustrating because you want to help and you want to have answers and you want to do the right things and you don't always have the answer. And so that's when we have to tap into the resources of having our social workers and our behavior specialists in our schools that help our kids maintain and learn how to regulate and learn how to be in classes where, they're a little bit more engaged in the learning rather than worried about their own health.
Is there a community safety story that can be told with all of this as well? Like that we could turn into a statistical story? Like schools who historically have this level of safety in a community have this much lower crime rate? Some kind of story like that? Is there a way to derive?
I'm sure there is.
Correlations even like that. I would imagine there's correlations like that because I imagine in other schools where, kids are, are going out in the world and they haven't gotten mental health situations under control. There's other safety things. The community is affected by those circumstances, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And from a taxpayer standpoint, it's like, what's in this for me? I don't have a kid in school. I really don't care about the kids, but wait a second, is our neighborhoods going to be safer maybe overall because of what we're doing here?
I think we could gather some of that money. I know that Officer Luke's involved in a lot of juvenile crime investigations that happen in the community. It could be shoplifting, it could be vandalism, it could be all kinds of things. So he is working those cases as well to make the community safe, but he works specifically with that juvenile population that he sees every day in school and builds relationships with. And they come forward and tell him a lot of information. I mean, that's one of the things that's nice about having the officer in school is the relationship he has with the kids. And if you come in and watch him interact with them on a daily basis, I mean, it's pretty amazing what they do.
That's a powerful part of the story, I think.
Well, I'd like to ask a question for the admin out there. So I'm just looking at the bulk numbers down here. And we kind of focus on the SROs, but that's like Drew pointed out, that's $128,000 when it's both of them compared to all the, 788 that's listed there. Is there, in your opinion, any of the principals, is there fat to trim? I mean, do the guidance counselors, are they already maxed out? Or any of these things like that, that's all I'm asking. I mean, and I think I know the answer, not.
They're very, I mean, if you really want my honest truth, we could use extra guidance counselors even in all of our buildings. We've never turned away that kind of support now for kids. I'm thankful that we have our behavior specialists and our social workers. If we wouldn't have them, I can't imagine what the workload would be for a counselor right now. Our social workers and our behavior specialists have kids in their office nonstop all day long.
I would say it daily, like our HSS teams, which is the psychological services teams in our schools, take a lot of the work that we normally think of, I think, as what counselors do in school, except for it's like actually offering real, counseling services to students while they're at school, which helps them to stay in school, to engage in school and all of that. And I honestly can't imagine what we would do if we lost those services. Because that would take up a lot of other resources that wouldn't allow us to be teaching in those types of things.
I see head nodding there, so.
Well, and our need is not diminishing. The need for mental health services is only growing, and the challenges that kids are facing and our community is facing as a result is not decreasing. So taking away any of those services would absolutely create more hardship for us. And one of the reasons why our schools are as successful as they are is because of the supports that kids are getting and the teaching that they're getting from both our behavior specialists and social work team, as well as our school resource officers who are able to educate kids and help them through this process while we have them with us and while they're young enough to experience consequences in a way that are not necessarily life-shattering.
That's what I assumed I would hear, but I wanted to hear it that, that if we have to make hard decisions, those are really hard decisions. Those aren't
Very much
trivial.
so.
Yeah, the
Yes.
burden's gonna fall on the classroom teacher and the admin, the principal team, and the classroom teacher is gonna have a harder time delivering a quality lesson because they're dealing with dysregulated children instead of focusing on being able to deliver quality instruction. So you take that away, it's going to have a huge impact on the culture and climate of the building.
Additional stuff? I think, I'll just say this, even taking on, if you did this as a risk assessment, and you said, what's the things, there's two things that come up, even for all of these, not just SROs, you're looking at potential suicides and potential school shooters and things. If you look at that in terms of impact, one event impact, it's significantly high. And that money is not, if you were looking at this from a risk assessment, that money does not, for that impact that you have on that. And that's what you're trying to avoid, right? That's what we're trying to avoid completely. So to me, that this is not a lot for that level of reducing that risk and potential impact. Because one of those incidences, and yes, I am from Colorado, so Columbine is one of those things. It was very far from my school. Those impacts affect that school forever. And that's, those type of risk assessments, when you look at that, I think are devastating for people who have been around that kind of stuff. You cannot recover. And so you need to prevent that. So you do not go there.
Can I change the subject?
You can.
I'm pretty sure everybody in this room agrees with me. We're gonna have to have this. How much I don't think it makes a difference. Of those numbers on the table. I mean, if we go to 85 million like we were asking for the middle school at one time, that makes a difference. But if we're gonna pass this, we have to change our strategies from the past. They didn't work. I think we all got caught up in, oh, my group, this is gonna pass, my group's all 100% for it. Well, it was only 100 people in my group. We did not change, no, I'm not gonna even say that, because we're not gonna change many votes. We did not get the non-voters out that actually have a stake in this school. I would love to see a percentage of parents that actually voted yes or no, I don't care, voted on the last bond or levy from K-6. I mean, obviously, we don't have those numbers, but I think it would surprise us on how low it is. Not because of negativity, but more apathy. We have to attract those people, because they have the most to win and the most to lose. If I have a senior in high school, well, I'll take, Mary, my granddaughter, my son, it's not gonna, whatever we do here in the next 2 years, it's not gonna affect them that much. It's first graders, second graders. It's going to affect them. So I don't know how we do it. There's a lot smarter people in here than I am, but we gotta change and figure it out. And maybe even push the limits of, is this right or wrong as far as how we do it? There's not an SRO in here.
But what you're saying is true, because the frustration that I had when we were doing the bond is that I feel like that the limitations on what we can do, what we can say, how we can advertise, I mean, we all could be pretty effective proponents of these things, but we're rather handcuffed. I mean, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, but I think we also played the game of, well, we don't want to go that far. Somebody might sue us. I mean, maybe we need to take some chances and just go out and do it. I mean, I went to 4 or 5 public meetings over it and listened. And to Tom's credit, whoever else helped him, he did a nice job presenting. It was me, my dog, and 4 other teachers there. That was it. And maybe some Claudio man that just wanted to come and ask bad questions because he didn't have anything else to do. So that was it. I mean, I think we have to have those meetings. You know, I think we have to, yeah, there's 2 of us.
It's interesting. I was just at the water court meeting, 6 o'clock, it was packed.
Which one?
They're issuing a decree on water rights.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's there, it's packed. Everyone cares. They want to know what is this, what's it gonna be? And apparently, we don't have the same interest level in the school district.
No, and in all fairness, that's been a problem from eternity. I mean, the only time people are truly interested, or most people, is when the kids are there. And then they're gone, and they move on and worry about the water rights, which they probably shouldn't worry about.
I mean, I say that too, and I agree with you. We gotta find a way to get people to care. Maybe we can.
Yeah. And that group that Erica shepherds over there, that's a big group. And they still are proud of their kids. They're not, their kids haven't moved up to high school and got some problems yet.
No, good points. All right, so where are we landing on these things? It sounds like we need to do it, and we have to have a plan, right?
I just have 2 more quick
Yeah, go for it.
questions that I think help the discussion. First of all, when we talk about having to make hard decisions, what's the timeline on that? Where are we sitting? How pressed are we? Is it something that if we don't make a decision and have success this May, are we hosed in June? Or are we planning 2 to 3 years out? I see 2 to 3 year projections, but.
Yeah, I think 2 to 3 years is when you'll see that. You'll start to see in 2 years. You probably won't see it this May, in 2 years, at the end of that next fiscal year, you're gonna need to see some adjustments.
So the short answer is we do have the potential, not that I'm advocating for or against, but we do have the potential of pushing this to a November election or to the next year, same time election, and still not have to make any significant adjustment cuts, hard decisions on the budget. Yes, no?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay. Second question is that, when we talk about these numbers here, I mean, they matter in two ways. What is adequate to cover our foreseeable needs now versus what is the idea? Because I don't think voters like you coming back and back and back and back and back and back. Like even though they voted it all down, that's what they feel like. They feel like every election they're asking for money. Well, you've never given us any, so that's why we keep asking, right? But, you know, they still feel like we're just pounding the crap out of them every election. And they think that they give us something because it was on the ballot, which they haven't. So what, in your opinion here, we've got three options here. Most people land in the middle. I mean, that's kind of sales tactics. So if we're picking 430 and either 344 or 475 here on those two, if that's what we're kind of talking about, how long is that adequate for before we start saying, we're getting squeezed again?
If you're using those values, I think we're looking at a decade before we're,
Pretty long term.
Yeah.
On which numbers though?
I would say the 430 and the 344 or the 475 on the bottom.
And so aside from our Taj Mahal that we really like, this gives us adequate operating costs to keep all of this intact, functioning well. It doesn't address obviously the concerns of middle school, that kind of jazz, because that's not part of it. But outside of that, we're not probably talking about foreseeable additional levies down the road for a decade. Okay.
I don't think there's a number on this paper that people are gonna go, that's just too much, I can't afford it. They're either gonna just vote no because they wanna vote no, or they'll vote for whatever number.
So whether we ask for 255 or 515,
I don't
it's the same
think-
number of yeses, the same.
Yes, I think so. We just have to get people to vote that have never voted.
So I'll bring this up because we can, so we're looking at this because we can separate the safety, security, and tech and describe it. You know, we're still not at 100% of general fund.
And we're 2 million short.
Right. So is it better to look that direction or pinpoint on a safety and tech level?
You know me, I'm a general fund guy, but I think we can pass this easier. People can focus on this. General fund is general fund.
There's a story behind these,
Yes.
and I think you can get people engaged into it. So I think what we need to do to be successful is speak to our audience in a way that we got to know who our audience is, speak to them in a way that they find the value in what we're speaking to. I think that's the thing that we have to really, really focus on. We dial in on that audience that we are trying to get out and make it valuable for them, make it imperative that they do something. If we can present that kind of a story and a value, I think we have a better shot at doing something, because I think it's a story that people either gonna buy into and see the value of, or they're not gonna see the value.
And do we have time to do that before May?
Mr. Dennis?
Yeah.
The technology level does sunset in 10 years, is that correct?
Yeah, yes, yes.
So it's not going on forever. It actually will sunset in 10. And safety, does it go on?
You can, have it a perpetual levy, or you can set a term to it.
I think that's
would say
one of the
it's
things,
perpetual.
I think that's a good story for the technology levy is, hey, we see this getting us through 10 more years. We may go back at that time when it sunsets and we'll have the numbers for you, whatever we can do. I think that may help the voters vote yes, because it's not going on for forever. I don't know, just a thought.
Well, then your technology is gonna go on forever.
It is.
So after 10 years, the only possibility is that we ask for a bigger.
That's probably really
That's a long story.
That's true. So leave that part out.
Yeah, just don't do it again.
Mike?
It's hard to know what the story's gonna be in 10 years or 5 years.
Yeah, sure,
So I think it's hard to think about it that way. That's how I would think about it. But I also think like there's some value in, I mean, everybody's focused on affordability and inflation, and everybody knows inflation has been affecting us. So locking in prices right now on some of this stuff, like Mike's talking about, before, we all know it's gonna be impacted by inflation. It's runaway inflation on some of the stuff. We see it because of Netflix. We see it because of some of these things people can relate to. It just keeps on getting worse and worse and worse and worse, regardless of the fact that inflation is there. Locking it in sounds sensible to me, sounds reasonable, sounds like we're trying to be accountable. I like that part of the story. If we can do that, I think that's a great part of the story.
Yeah, there's no doubt, I mean, Mike's already given me the story about RAM prices and stuff like that, which is ridiculous. And so it's, I think that's saying.
It's gonna get worse.
Well, yeah,
It's gonna get more exploitative. I mean, it just is.
absolutely, I mean, we can see it, right? I mean, that's the, is good, bad, or evil, or whatever the AI may be. Right now, it's pulling every resource possible, and it's the machine that is nonstop, and so it's gonna make other consumable technology go. What's happening?
I don't know how much of a story we need to put out there. I mean, I walked in tonight hesitant to vote yes on either of these, not because I don't think they're important, because I've seen 2 bonds fail. Just listening to Mike talk about what the technology needs are and why they are convinced me, all right, we need them. And listening to the administrators talk about the safety concerns in our school and how that benefits education and what the kids are gonna do, convinced me that we need that. And so I don't think we need to generate a story, we just need to communicate the honest truth from like the people we're looking to actually be hands-on doing the operations.
Yeah, if we could come up with some silver bullet that would get into the mind of the voter and help them appreciate what our admin team is challenged with, just on a daily basis, and the support they have and what that would look like if it evaporated. I mean, I'm kind of just throwing this out there, but I mean, that seems to me, if we can figure out how to distill that message down and deliver it, this is what we have. If we don't have that, you guys got to appreciate the drastic difference that's going to exist inside classrooms.
People get their news and get their opinions from the people they know and trust.
Yeah.
And so we have to put the people that we, in our district that are known and trusted by our families, to help us get this information in their hands.
I think going to Mark's point is not just giving information, but giving
So-
information to action.
Can we, and I know you guys have already been talking about it in administration. Can you guys get something to us in the next 2 weeks of at least we can add to or subtract from or something, or maybe in a week?
Yeah.
Because if we're gonna do it in May or whatever, it needs to be done.
I would suggest, one of the things that I wanted to put into place, I really was delaying this a bit, was with the Cognia work that our admin team is doing to try to get our strategic plan off the ground. And one of the areas that they ask us to look at is really stakeholder feedback and getting information about our stakeholders and creating relationships with people. I would like one of the school community relations committee to be working and monitoring that sort of thing at all times. And I think it makes sense to start to build that team together now. Even though we haven't necessarily done the strategic plan, the first order of business can be communication of this. And, creating strategies so that we can get the right messaging out in front of our voters and try to build some support. I think, yes, I think to answer your question, yeah, I think in 2 weeks we can get something put together that.
Because if we're gonna do it, we gotta do it.
Yeah.
Be done talking about it and get it done.
Okay. Anything else before we start figuring out numbers? I know we can just pick numbers, that's what you want, but. But we still have to pick numbers.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Drew, any other comments? I see wheels turning. Okay. Cool. So, obviously Dave came with his thought processes and trying to figure out where we would be, 430, 344, 475, something like that, and get us 10-year span. That's about, you're looking at about $130 or so for a $600,000 house, which boils down to someone do the math, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so, the $430,000 in the tech, just the middle one will give you kind of the ballpark, it's $5.19. The 344 down on the bottom in the safety security will be $4.16. The 475 would be $5.74. So let's just say hypothetically that you did 430 for the tech levy at $5.19, and let's say 344 to keep it under $10. You'd keep that under $10 a month to get both. It's just an option. Or if you bump to 475, you're really looking at $10 and almost $11.
That's 1094.
So playing devil's advocate, if people would vote for one and not the other, which is a high possibility, they're probably gonna pick the lesser. Is it 344 give us enough funding to make a big dent and still function pretty well for that 10 years, or?
It's helpful. It's helpful.
Or do we do 430 and 475 and keep that?
That's what I'm getting at.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm leaning towards. Don't pick the top, but pick somewhere in the middle.
I'm all for that one.
I mean, that's what I would say too, 475 and 430, because I hope they vote for two, but I think it's more likely for a yes that they're gonna vote the safety and not the tech. That's just kind of what I think people think.
I think you're right.
But I might be plumb freaking wrong, I've been a lot of times.
Well, I have a vested interest in one or the other, but I have to agree with you, obviously.
Well, but the fact is basically what we're doing is trying to be transparent about our costs, but free up money from the general fund to basically cover the rest of the other, right? So we're not saying one or, we're saying, okay, well, we'll call it a safety levy. If that passes, then we gotta pull more out of another spot to cover the tech side of things, right? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
And in my understanding, like, these dollars would be committed to tech and safety,
Yes.
and anything in addition would be pulled out of general fund or one of our other accounts.
Right.
As it is.
All right, well, it sounds like we kind of have a consensus, the 475 for safety and the 433 for tech. That's
Drew, are you good with those?
And yeah, I was just thinking, try to keep them as close to the same dollar amount as possible. The bright spot is the sunset on the technology level. But I think running them both, you have the opportunity to frame it more as just, it's our basic infrastructure on both sides, safety and technology, so.
all right.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm right there.
Perfect.
So I make a recommendation of it.
Additional discussion or anything like that? If not, can I get a motion to go for the 475 for the safety and security levy and a 430 for the tech levy?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? Anything else? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, that's all we have. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back.
Are we gonna need another special meeting coming up? Hopefully I can get it.
This all packaged together
By the regular.
February 10th.
Yeah.